Okay, we'll move on to our second speaker, Dr. Karisha, who is a lecturer in psychology and the director of the EDI Research Center and chair of the University DCC group. She began her tertiary education in Trinidad and Tobago, completing her undergrad in psychology and sociology at the University of the West Indies. She then moved to the UK to complete her master's in applied forensic psychology and PhD in psychology at the University of York. She came back to York in 2021 after completing her first postdoctoral position at the Newman University, followed by her first lectureship at the De Montfort University.
Okay, just gonna say, my name's Karisha, but when you said it, I'm like, oh, it's me he's talking about, but yeah. Never heard that version before. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys about a project that we did within the Faculty of Science, trying to develop a way of kind of encouraging people to engage with the science. So I'm from psychology, so we're all both in the same faculty, psychology and chemistry. And what I consistently found was that within the sciences, there's this resistance to decolonization, mainly because we believe that for you to be a proper scientist, you have to cover specific information, and that specific information is objective and is factual. And so how can we change that information in order to make people feel better in the classroom when that information is required as the building blocks to become a better scientist? And so alongside myself and Caroline and a couple other people in the room, we got a kind of small pot of money to develop what we're calling the Faculty of Science DDC Toolkit. And essentially what we're trying to do here is to introduce DDC in a way that scientists aren't going to be like automatically putting barriers up. We're not starting off with saying that you need to change your material. We're considering other ways in which the material can stay as it is, but it still becomes decolonized. And that's what I'm going to walk you guys through today. Oopsie. Okay, right, so just click on that. Okay, cool. All right. So I know Kaleshi covered this as well, and I think I'm going to be a lot more fervent in terms of the vocabulary I use, because sitting on the DDC, the chair, I'm just at my level of frustration with the extent to which people come at me with this firm belief that they're correct, and I come at them with the belief that no, you're not. So I'm going to use a lot more kind of strong vocabulary, right? And so essentially, when a minoritized individual enters into higher education, what we are consistently putting forward to them is that white, able-bodied male knowledge is superior. It is ingrained from the previous educational experiences they would have had, and we know, for instance, that black male students are still seen as aggressive and they're over-policed, and we have this case of child Q where black female students are more sexualized. And so within their, child Q where a white head teacher strip searched a black student, black female students. And so we're seeing essentially that throughout their prior educational experiences, they're getting told that they are less, that they need to be overpoliced, that they need to have these extra barriers in order to become normal. And when they enter into the university, we're repositioning or reinforcing that based on the white majority that they come to. And the majority of higher education within the UK is white majority, and male, able-bodied, et cetera. But outside of that, in terms of how we're teaching them in the classroom, we are still reinforcing that white male equal intelligence. And that is essentially where DDC starts off. When someone comes in, remember they're having all these other social experiences and they're coming into the classroom and they're seeing that everything that they're learning is reinforcing that white is superior. And it's not even just that white is superior. One of the experiences that students recounted to me was when we were dealing with the psychology of the riots. The videos that were shown only associated the riots with black individuals. There was no, and that's not something that the lecturer would have intentionally done. They would not have seen it. And so that's where we're coming from. You need to have the lens of decolonization in order to realize that these are faux pas that you can do. And if we're not doing that, we're not giving students the inclusive experience that we expect all our students to have, right? And so we know within the literature that the experiences of exclusion and alienation within the classroom is what has increased or contributed to the attainment gaps. And so we need to decolonize in order to help students have high academic aspirations, and increased representation across all stages within the university educational experience, so from undergrad straight through to PhD. Within the post-1992 universities, we're seeing a lot of this social justice teaching framework coming forward, where they're saying that the main purpose of higher education is to create social activists. And if we don't kind of make an active effort to engage all students deeply in their learning, we are perpetuating the structural and social inequalities that exist in wider society. But we all know a lot about the SDG goals as well, and these relate to the SDG goals of quality education and good health and well-being, because when students see that there has been these kind of contributions from people from their similar backgrounds, but what you'll see is that we'll talk about other dimensions. So it's not only about making that extra effort to diversify what you're teaching, but also if you find yourself in a situation where there still is that white male, able-bodied prevalence of knowledge, talking about why that is. So talking about the fact that this is because Black people were not recognized for this, that, and the other. This is because disability was not recognized for this, that, and the other, and bringing in that wider context. And so those type of things will empower students from underrepresented backgrounds, as it recognizes why they are still seen as second-class citizens within society, and why that is reflected in what they're learning in the classroom. And that also shows that we have a cultural awareness and sensitivity, and we can do our bit in unraveling kind of the prior experiences that they've had that have been negative. So the two concepts emerged. So our toolkit emerged from three kind of stages. There was first a scoping review, and then we did focus groups with staff and students. And we found that within the sciences in particular, there's two aspects to decolonization. The first one is to change how you see your students. So it's not that traditional, you standing up as a lecturer and giving the knowledge in little cups, and everybody takes the cups and drink. Essentially, you have to allow the students to play an active role in their learning. And that is what we're calling decolonizing and diversifying pedagogical practice. And here you're focusing on using the teaching to empower these students. And this is something that we, within the literature, is kind of called cultural capital. Because when a minoritized individual thinks differently from what they see as the norm, that sense of what they bring because of their background and their experiences is usually phrased in a deficit lens. In order to become a chemist, in order to become a psychologist, you have to think this way and accept these theories. But if we tell them that what you bring, the lens you bring, the perceptions you bring are also equally as important, that is what we're doing when they're decolonizing and diversifying our practice. We're giving strength to their voice. And the second one about decolonizing the curriculum, which we already know about the increasing the inclusivity of the material itself, but as I previously mentioned, it's also about introducing the historical context or the reasons behind the existing underrepresentation. And so for this slide, I'm giving you a bit of an understanding of what this would look like in the sciences, right? So given that we still have a largely white, male, able-bodied kind of knowledge base, what we should then be focusing on are three core things. And it is to some degree a repetition of what I've said before, but I like to repeat myself multiple times because I think it gets lower, 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 and deeply ingrained every single time I say it. So the first thing is that we're going to focus on supporting students in seeing themselves in the curriculum. And that is giving them an active role in what we're teaching. So giving them opportunities to shape the curriculum. What do they want to be taught and how do they want to be taught it? And that can help them to start gaining that voice, gaining that optimism, giving that confidence. And so that can go some way in counteracting the lack of diversity in the content they'll be exposed to. But also we want to encourage other ways of thinking and learning. So then give them a variety of ways of engaging with the material so that they get to shape what they take home from that material. And I know within the university, there's a lot of using play and Legos and stuff, for instance. But also telling them how we know what we know. And I've talked about this before. So dispelling the authority of white knowledge by reviewing the unethical aspects or backgrounds of the white sciences. So for instance, within our department, one of the lecturers gives a talk on the background of Pearson's and how he was very engaged in eugenics. And so they then get to, you can also discuss other processes of coming to valued contributions. So you can actually talk about why a specific person who you know has contributed has not been recognized for their contribution. And we know, for instance, Mary Seacole is very under-mentioned, and instead we focus on things like Florence Nightingale, right? And then the final thing is that you telling them that this is very important, so you then are asking them to critically engage with this information. So use it as them critically exploring what is the result of us focusing on only this limited amount of knowledge, right? And so they get to then understand how their knowledge can bring change to the current situation as well, so their inputs and their contributions. And so within the Faculty of Sciences, there are other challenges that emerge from the research that we did. Essentially, what we're seeing is that we recognize that they're workloading, and you come to understand that your slides work especially after like 3 revisions of those slides. You update them, yes, but you update them very minimally because you have put in the work on those slides over the years. It should be reducing as you go along. And so we know that that would then produce an additional structural barrier for individuals when they have to think about completely changing. And that's why we're getting away from that change of content to doing things around the content. Sometimes it's not as obvious for certain ones. So for instance, within our university, we know that the Faculty of Arts and Humanities are one of the strongest in terms of decolonization, and it is harder within the sciences. And even across the sciences, it's going to be easier for certain disciplines compared to others. And what it would look like, so what that final output looks like will differ based on which discipline that you are in, but also kind of this tension between giving students an active role. It's not what we do in the sciences. We're okay with our little mentee dropping it in here, there, and the other, tell them, okay, that's great, but actually having them shape how we teach it and what we teach, that's like, oh, I've been here for years. They've been here for months. And so that is also something that we know that we have to kind of introduce people to in baby steps. And so based on that, within one of the key defining aspects of the toolkit is that we have it in levels, right? And so the first level is introducing people to this decolonization and diversification of the pedagogical practice. And the QR code is to the toolkit. And so one of the things is about, we just have by force, and some of us it is by force, we have student feedback at the end of our module. I know we had a recent change where we then have to tell the students what we've done to their feedback, and ooh, there was bacchanal because no one wanted to do that. And so one of the things that we're arguing here is that that should not just be a one-off. You should actively be always asking students what's happening and try how are they feeling about what they taught, how would they like things to be changed, right? And so that there's an example of how that's done on the toolkit as well, where someone has a Google Doc that they're consistently kind of asking students and making changes. But also get away from this, I'm the superior knowledge, and you're talking to these students. Give them different things to do, different ways in which they can engage with the work that you're doing. So there's a lot of games around strange facts, so have them apply it, seeing how they can change what they have learned in a way that fits a specific thing that's relevant to them. And so other games like higher or lower, true or false, and there are resources on the toolkit with examples of that for you guys to see. And level 2 is when we're saying, oh, you're advancing and you're changing. So the first thing is to change how you see these students. You're advancing in how you see these students and helping them to change, helping understanding their role in the classroom as much as your role. And now you're able to dip your feet into decolonizing the curriculum itself. And here's where we're saying that don't focus on having to change your material, because that is something that will take time to figure out what is of good quality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so start off by looking at the people that you have and talking about why are they the ones who are most revered in relation to this? Is it because there was someone else that contributed to their work that's not usually mentioned, et cetera, et cetera? And do they have some dodgy backgrounds, for instance, with Pearson's and eugenics? So discuss the background of different researchers. If you do have a researcher that is of a global majority background or is disabled in some way, you highlight that while you're going through it. I know a lot of us just say the name and continue on, but put a little picture to show the students that there is this variation. And start talking to them about the colonial biases. And I know that this might be something that will be quite difficult for some people, because we try to pretend that that was way over there and we are now way over here. But I do think that having them understand why it is the way it is very important aspect of the DDC work. And there again, resources on the toolkit to help you with that. And then finally, The level 3 is when you are becoming an expert in both aspects, so decolonizing your pedagogical practice as well as the curriculum. And here's where you're telling students that this is so important that we're going to start assessing you on it. Right? So you start to assess their awareness of the colonial biases in STEM, but encourage them to critically examine how we are reproducing that. If we were not to start having these conversations, how we will continuously reproduce that. So I know, for instance, within chemistry, because you guys don't have as, from my understanding, just in case I'm incorrect, because you have within STEM generally anyway, we have this lack of females contributing to like the higher level creation of different things. There's a bias in terms of the extent to which certain things are reflective of what females need, right? And so essentially showing them that if they don't want to continue, if they don't consider continuing on, then this will continue as well, right? So the impact of the lack of their representation and the lack of their voices on how society is progressing. But a new thing as well not new, is universal design for learning. And I know within these sciences, we like to know if something works, we don't change that. Years on cobwebs, but it works and we keep it. But within the universal design for learning, they're arguing that you must be seeing your students as needing, as constantly changing, and you need to therefore be flexible. So they're saying flexible teaching. Every year you should be trying something new. They're saying flexible assessments, where you're giving students different ways to show their learning. And so they're saying that in your classroom, you have different students with different needs, and you have to learn to differentiate to meet as many of those needs as possible. But also take the students on a journey with you. So for instance, within my psychology of well-being lecture, I tell them that I have a little global map, and I ask them where they're from in the first lecture, and then I try to go like if we're on a plane. So we're starting off in Iran, we're going all the way to Turkey, which helps when I have the map because I don't actually know it anywhere else. Woo! I actually thought London was the most south part of the UK for most of my time here. Until someone said Portsmouth, and I'm like, where the heck is that? And so we have the map, so that helps. And so you take them on that journey with you. And so essentially what you then get them to do is to become involved, and they start giving you suggestions, et cetera, as well. And there are resources on the toolkit to help with that. And my final slide is just to highlight everybody that helped us. So I always want to know, I always think that the view that students are here to just be absorbing and not giving is a very outdated view. In every single one of our projects, we've had students who then do the majority of the work, and you're just like, oh, this feels different. And so we had student partners on this, one for each of the departments that were involved, so biology, chemistry, computer science, and psychology. Just want to give a shout out to V, James, Prince, and Amelie. And then we had staff members, of course. So Penn, John, and Caroline, who's in the room, Phoebe, and myself. And that is a thing to the toolkit as well. I think I'm within my time. Okay, perfect. Thank you so very much for having me.